Italy, France, Germany, and the UK all recorded their lowest daily death tolls in a week, in a sign that the curve of coronavirus cases is flattening in Europe.
Finally, boy, that's good
Governments
news.
across the continent are cautiously lifting lockdowns, with some shops and workplaces opening up for business. Joining us from Rome, NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley, and in Beijing, NBC News correspondent Janice Mackey-Frayer. Matt, we'll start with you. Around the world, we're seeing spots of unrest growing amid those lockdowns. What trends are you noticing?
Yeah, Mika, we can say that there are echoes of the same protests that we're seeing in the States, but throughout the world, they're actually quite a bit more violent. We just saw some protests in Paris, in the outskirts of Paris, in the banlieue, and this was just yesterday. These aren't necessarily tied directly to the coronavirus and its effects, but it is part of that. Poverty is going to be increasing. We've seen from the United Nations as many as 500,000 people throughout the world could slide into poverty as a result of these lockdowns. And we're seeing riots in Lebanon, in Iraq's Baghdad's Sadr city. We saw them in Kenya, as many people have died of COVID-19 as have been killed by police who are enforcing the lockdown related to COVID-19. So when we go around and we talk about how the economic effect and how these governors are going to be in the United States are bucking this the president's orders and trying to lift the lockdown when they shouldn't, we do have to remember that throughout the world, especially in places like India, where police were clashing with migrant workers who were unable to return home. There are billions and billions of peoples whose livelihoods are going to be affected in a way that they wouldn't in America, who will slip from being just poor to being absolutely destitute. And for them, this isn't just about the virus. For people here in Italy, there's a major imbalance. In the north of Italy, we've seen a lot more cases of the actual virus, and that's a much wealthier place. In the South, there aren't as many cases. And so for people there, they are actually feeling the economic impact much, much, much worse because it was so poor. So there is this feeling in some parts of the world that this is a rich person's disease. And that's part of the problem here. That's part of the perception. And one of the reasons why you're starting to see unrest, paroxysms of violence throughout the entire world. Guys?
So let's go to Janice, where she is. Janice, there are certain areas that there are resurgences, the virus popping back up. What does it look like? What can we learn from what they are seeing there?
Well, as you look a couple months out down the timeline of this disease, there are some red flags that are popping up. Cases continue to dog countries across Asia. Take Singapore, for example. For the past couple of months, they had the numbers under control. They put in a system of testing. They had a system where they could track infections in order to give the appearance of controlling it until they weren't controlling it. There are now thousands of cases being reported in Singapore, over 1,400 yesterday alone. A lot of them are being linked to these large communities of migrant workers that just didn't come onto the government's radar before. And that's why in places like Hong Kong, even though they're reporting no new cases, they're expanding their social distancing rules. In South Korea, they're down to single digits for new cases every day, but they're still keeping restrictions in place so they can avoid a new outbreak. And here in China, even though the parts of the economy are coming back on track, there are still a lot of restrictions in place. Here in Beijing, anybody coming to the city, whether it's from outside of the country or somewhere else in China, you have to do 14 days of quarantine. They have a system in place here where even to get into the grocery store or to go to Starbucks, you have to show your health code to prove that you are virus-free. And these restrictions are expected to stay in place for a while because they don't want to have this feared second wave. I talked to one expert who said that this is what we can expect, this cycle of suppression and lift, possibly for the next 18 months until there is a vaccine. So what that means for the U.S. is that even when and if the curve does flatten, there will not be this immediate rebound or revival of the way things were, at least not anytime soon.
All right, Janice Mackey-Frayer in Beijing and Matt Bradley in Rome. Thank you both. And coming up, new research shows the outbreak in Los Angeles County is likely far more widespread than previously thought. It's connected to those antibody tests we've been hearing about. Our chief medical correspondent, Dr. Dave Campbell, explains that next on Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.